YouTube, Sidekick here with my first impressions and review of the Beech 18 from Microsoft and Carenado. Now, when I found out that the Beech 18 was announced as part of World Update 10, I gotta admit I was pretty much on my way to the marketplace to pick it up. And that's because the Beech 18 pretty much ticks all of the boxes for me. It's a golden age of piston engines aircraft, which means that it has a steam gauge cockpit, although not necessarily an overly simple one. It means that I would probably have to spend more time flying it than programming the autopilot, and it means, or at least I hope that it meant, that it would have a bit of character, both inside and out. Having looked quickly at the specs, I could see that it would be powerful enough to have a decent cruising speed, but be small enough to get in and out of fairly small airports. Given that most of the flying I do in Microsoft Flight Simulator is what I would call VFR sightseeing, and these characteristics also sounded like it would be at home in my hangar. That hangar, for the record, includes similar aircraft like the GA-44 Widgeon and the big radials JRF-6 Goose, and it also includes the Aerosoft DHC-6 Twin Otter, which, although it's a bit larger and a bit newer, is still very much in the same kind of flying experience. For reference, I also own the Carenado Cessna 170, which I enjoy for many of the reasons that I listed above. So, the Beech 18 was a pretty natural fit, and at a very attractive price of under $20 US, it was pretty much a no-brainer, at least for me. So the big question, am I glad I bought the aircraft? Well, the answer is an unequivocal yes. To be clear, the aircraft isn't everything that I could have hoped it would be, or everything that I think it could be. Honestly, I think there are some ways in which it doesn't compare particularly well with some of the aircraft that I like to fly, but that being said, for the price, it was a great deal, and not one that I regret making, and I expect that I will spend a fair bit of time flying it. So let's talk about the Beech 18. When I first sat down in the cockpit, it pretty much ticked all the boxes I was looking for. The cockpit has character, the steam gauges are front and center, the only concession to modern avionics is the Garmin 430 unit, and it's over there on the co-pilot side. The switches, while not overly complicated, are unique to the aircraft, and so you do need to find your way around your new home before you can start the engines and monitor them, and that's a good thing. As I said, I like flying airplanes that have their own character and that require some familiarization to get good at flying them. All of that being said, though, the cockpit is pretty good. There are some nice wear patterns on the dashboard and on the control yoke. I mean, overall, sitting in the Beech 18 cockpit is a pretty immersive experience. Speaking of immersion, the cockpit does feel very good in VR. I find that this kind of cockpit works particularly well in VR. I think because the pilot position is so close to the windscreen, but the various controls and gauges are spread across the cockpit and up to the ceiling, in 2D you tend to spend a lot of time looking around to find what you're looking for. In VR you just kind of sit in the middle of it all, and it doesn't require nearly as much scanning because your peripheral vision is there. So, in terms of the visuals, the cockpit is pretty good. Now, the one place where the cockpit really didn't live up to my expectations was sound. The sound model is just, well, flat, I guess is the word. There's no depth to any of the sounds, no real chunk, no real clunk when the gear comes up or down or when the flaps deploy. No real new sound at all once the gear and flaps are down. It's really very hard to tell by sound alone that the flaps or the gear have actually been deployed. And honestly, I think this should be obvious in an aircraft of this size. There doesn't seem to be any directionality to the sound. Everything sounds exactly the same no matter which way you're looking. And the engine sounds really are underwhelming. There is no starter whine, there's no coughing startup sounds, there's no accelerating, chugging, rising to the guttural roar of those big cylinders drink that gasoline and come to life. Like I said, pretty underwhelming. And since the sound is a big part of the immersion in these kinds of aircraft, I do think that's unfortunate. The problem of the underwhelming engines is exacerbated by the fact that the sound of the engine boost pumps, which one would not tend to describe as satisfying, they're very loud. So loud, in fact, that you can't really hear anything else when they're on. Thankfully, they don't have to be on except at engine start, so I turn them each off as soon as the engine is started. Okay, that's it for how it looks and how it sounds. How does it fly? Well, the answer is okay. There certainly is a lot to like about flying the Beech 18. It does provide a gratifying level of big engine tail dragger challenge on takeoff, and to some extent on landing. You will definitely want to have your rudder dancing shoes on. Alright, we're up and away, so let's just climb out here and go out to the practice area. We're flying out of the Gatineau Airport here on the other side of the river from Ottawa, Canada's nation's capital. I'm going to go fly over the Gatineau Hills, which is where I like to take aircraft out. For my test flights, we're climbing out at between 100 and 120 miles an hour. The power isn't completely maxed out, but we're kind of at the upper end of the manifold pressure and the RPM for the initial climb out. So we're just going to climb out a little bit here to the west and then turn a little bit to the northwest and do a little bit of just ringing out the airplane, see how it handles. Okay, here we are pointed down the Gatineau River into the setting sun. And let's just start with some steep turns. First we'll go around here to the left. So far I'm finding that the Beech 18 is really very pleasant to fly, very easy to fly. Doesn't really have any bad habits. I guess if I had anything to quibble about, it's the fact that it doesn't really seem to have any habits at all. Again, kind of like the sound model, I think the flight model feels a little bit, I don't know, flat to me. Not a lot of character. In particular, you can see, a pretty steep turn here, and I'm barely touching the rudder. Just don't seem to need a lot of stick and rudder coordination to fly the aircraft, which surprises me a little for an aircraft of its vintage and also for its size and weight. Now, I've never flown a real Beech 18, so I don't know if that is actually characteristic of the type or not, but again, it just feels like it could be flying any old aircraft. And I'd been hoping for slightly more unique experience flying the Beech. And the other thing is that it really doesn't feel like it has any weight in the air. The controls are extremely responsive, even at this speed, at cruising speeds. Roll particularly is responsive, but pitch is really almost twitchy. In fact, if I had a complaint, it's that the pitch is so sensitive that it's extremely difficult to actually trim the aircraft properly. Okay, let's go back around to the right. So normally in a steep turn to the right, especially with this kind of airplane with the big piston engines, you'd expect that a right turn would feel quite a bit different than a left turn, particularly in terms of the amount of rudder that you need to use. There is a little bit of asymmetry. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little different, but again, probably not as much as I would have expected. And this is just a. But that being said, it is an extremely pleasant flying experience. The plane is smooth. As I said, it has no really bad habits. It's easy to fly reasonably precisely. At these cruise engine settings, the noise is certainly not uncomfortable in the cockpit. The visibility is very good. I'm loving these sky-like windows. Really help you when you're leaning into a turn like this. Now, overall, this is proving to be a very pleasant evening's flight over the Gatineau Hills. And to some extent, maybe what more do you want from Microsoft Flight Simulator? So, the Beech 18 is living up to my expectations in terms of feeling like a pretty nice little touring aircraft. We're stepping out here at a reasonable rate of speed, with moderate cruise settings, 30 inches of manifold pressure and 2,000 RPMs. We're managing somewhere around 150 miles an hour. Maybe I'll actually just take it up a notch here. And let's go to max cruise and see what we can get to. So we're basically at the red line, or the yellow line anyways, on manifold pressure. It's probably about 35 inches, and we've got the RPM set to 2400 RPM. And it looks like we're going to be getting pretty close to between 160 and 170 miles an hour at max cruise. Now, I have no idea what our fuel efficiency is like here. Probably not very good. It's a little bit noisier than it was at the kind of normal cruise, but if you wanted to get somewhere in a reasonable hurry, this wouldn't be a bad way to do it. Okay, we had a look at the high cruise setting. Let's take a look at some low speed, low power handling. So we're slowing down here. We're well below the 20 inches of mercury, and also got the RPMs backed off right to the edge of the green zone, down around 1700. So speed is dropping down through 100 miles an hour. We're just in another, moderate turn. And I definitely will say that the flight model does respond to airspeed. The roll in particular is getting pretty mushy. Pitch is still a little bit twitchy, less sensitive than it was, but again, more sensitive than I would have expected. And that just may be my expectations, but it is pretty pronounced how sensitive the aircraft is in pitch. And again, it really contributes to the lack of a feeling of real weight, because we're not very far above the stall speed now. And you do hear the aircraft, a little bit of noise there, aircraft complaining a little, so that's good. There's a little bit of depth to the sound modeling. As I said, it's not, certainly isn't unpleasant, and it's not bad. It's just not all the way to where I kind of expected it to be when I compare it to some of the other aircraft that I fly. Okay, let's try a stall here. So we do get a stall warning. We get a power warning if we cut the power to idle and the gear isn't down. That's what that horn is. See if we can slow up a little bit without having to trigger that too much. Alright, we're almost down to stall speed. There's the horn coming on. You can see the stall is pretty benign. You do have to really work at getting the full stall going here. I'm pulling back pretty hard. Sticks pretty much all the way back as far as it'll go, just a little bit more. See if we can actually get it all the way into the stall. And I'll have to pull the power back again. And there it is. The stall brake is pretty pronounced, and it does drop the right wing. Nothing that isn't manageable, but it certainly lets you know. And again, so that's good. Not looking for completely generic behavior. I'm actually, as I said, looking for a little bit of character. So that was actually good. Let's just turn around here and actually try a power on stall. So we'll get turned back around. Get the power up basically to our high cruise settings. And we'll just climb out and see what happens if we stall out at some reasonable power settings. Okay, let's go to the high cruise settings. Let's really see what the maximum we can get out of it before it stalls is. So here we go, pulling back. See, it will climb pretty steeply, at least for a while. Now we're getting up into the stall range. Things are getting pretty mushy. Nose really wants to drop. I'm having to pull back. Harder to keep the wings level. There's the horn. Gives you lots of warning on the stall, that's for sure. And there's the brake. And again, right wing drop, nose comes down pretty substantially, but nothing that you can't control. So overall, that's the stall behavior. And again, I would say that I'm pretty happy with that. There's some character in the way the airplane behaves. It kind of behaves the way you'd expect to, with a little bit of roll to the right, especially with the power on stall. That's more pronounced than power off, so that's kind of what I would expect as well. All right. Well, let's turn around here and let's try a coordination exercise. I'm going to try an exercise that's called a lazy 8, or it basically looks like wing overs. It's just a nice exercise to see how smoothly the aircraft flies and how much coordination is needed. I did a video on this, actually, if you want to check out the whole explanation on how to do the exercise. I think it's a great thing to try when you're getting the feel of a new airplane. So let me just get rolled out here, and we will start a lazy 8 with the first one to the left. We start with a pull-up and a small amount of bank to the left. Keep the turn coordinated. The nose is going to come up over the horizon, and then it's going to slide back down through the horizon as we come through 90 degrees. And we're going to let it keep going back down. Try to keep coordinated there. And then we're going to roll out 180, and we're going to do it back to the right. Overall, that's a nice exercise in the Beech, and again, it's very smooth. I don't think it's changed any of my opinions about it. It's still it's maybe a little bit too responsive. Doesn't feel like quite as much weight as I would have expected when I fly other aircraft like Warbirds, but also like the Goose, and I fly this maneuver. You can really feel the weight on the downward side of the Lazy 8. You can feel those big engines at the front of the aircraft. Don't really get the same sense of that with the Beech. It's subtle. It's not that it makes it unpleasant. Again, it's just it feels a little bit less like it has a little bit less of the kind of character that I would expect from an aircraft of this type. Okay, let's see what else can we do while we're out here on this lovely evening in the Gatineau Hills. Maybe having checked out the aircraft, it's time just to get down a little lower and see if we can annoy some of the locals. Okay, well, that powered descent was very manageable. So now, kept everything in the green all the way down, power and speed. Now we're just adding a little bit more power here, and we're going to go around the corner, go down around the lake here. The aircraft, again, it's a little twitchy in pitch, but I'm not uncomfortable flying this close to the ground. It's pretty easy to get around the corners as well for an aircraft of this size. And again, maybe it's a little too easy. Doesn't make it mean it isn't fun, though. Alright, so let's get down here closer to the level of the water. Follow the lake around. Bring some power back in here, give the locals a show. So again, as you can see, you know, performance-wise, the Beech is a great choice. If you do want to go out and do some sightseeing, you're going to be able to cruise at between 150 and 170 knots without a lot of trouble. The visibility is quite good. You don't see a lot out the sides of the cockpit because of the engines, but the visibility forward is very good. And you have those skylight windows that actually mean when you're turning, you get some good visibility for seeing the sights. So overall, I think Beech is a great choice if you're looking to go out and do some, as I call it, VFR sightseeing in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, here, let's pull up. Now, I often do this trip in Warbirds. I got to remember to be a little bit less aggressive than that, but still, we can come up, let the nose come down through the wing over there. Been a little bit more coordinated. And let's go across the top of the hills and over the escarpment and down the other side. Again, that was a very manageable maneuver. You definitely feel that you don't have a lot of power to climb out. Even going at max power and max speed, you're not going to zoom climb in the Beech 18, that's for sure. And let's go back down over the escarpment here, sticking close to the trees. But then again, I don't think you're going to be taking the Beech 18 out for its aerobatic qualities. So all in all, this has been a very enjoyable flight in the Beech 18. My disappointment that it doesn't have a little bit more character is really just based on the fact that that's really what I enjoy about aircraft of this era. It doesn't evoke the era quite as much to me, partly because I think the sound model just doesn't have the depth, but I also do think that the flight model is a little bit flat. I don't think that it's been fully tuned to really represent the kind of unique characteristics of the aircraft. But again, it's only $20, so maybe that is unrealistic to expect that level of attention to detail at that price point. So we're just going back up here, one more kind of wing over back over the top of the escarpment. And with that, I think it's about time to get rolled out and maybe head back to the field. We're approaching the field here in kind of a wide downwind. Now would be a good time to mention that the Beech 18 does come with a fully functional autopilot. It's an earlier press button kind of autopilot, somewhere between the gyro pilot on the Goose and the early Bendix model on the DHC-6. It provides basic attitude hold functions as well as the ability to hold altitude and heading as well. The one issue I had with it was that I couldn't figure out how to enable it from a switch. I could only ever turn it on using the hotkey or a button bind. This was not a huge limitation, but it did seem a little odd. Okay, so we're just about ready to wrap this flight up. We're basically coming abeam the field here. As I said, we're a little bit wide on downwind, but we got a nice view down the river here. So I'm going to come in on base here shortly. Trying to get down to around 1,000 feet before we turn on base. You can see we've basically been pulled back to idle for a while to keep the speed reasonable as we're descending. Again, nothing unpleasant about this, although I do wonder if the real Beech 18s would require so little power to maintain, what is over 100 knots in a descent like this. But again, it's not a question I really can answer. Okay, so let's start turning base. Probably going to want to get the landing gear down here in a minute. Right, square it up, we'll get the landing gear down. So once again, the landing gear sound is pretty understated. There really isn't a whole lot of low frequency sounds in there that give you sort of the clunk and the chunk you'd like. And then there's really no sound generated by having the landing gear down. And given that they are substantial, I would have thought you'd hear them a little bit. Same thing now, you feel the flaps going down. Again, I don't know, those sounds to me are pretty underwhelming. And then once the flaps are down, you don't get any sound at all. And given the size of the kind of barn door flaps on the Beech 18, I think I would expect to hear something. And I'd also, I think, expect for the flight characteristics to be affected a little bit more than they are. There's a lot of drag back there at the back of the wing. There's no tendency for the aircraft to really pitch up. And I've really no need to add a whole lot of power to keep it on more or less this lane glide slope even after the flaps are complete. And again, it just feels a little, I don't know, optimistic to me. I think that the other aircraft again that I fly that are similar to the Beech, particularly the Goose, but even the Twin Otter, they behave very differently with flaps and gear down than they do in a clean configuration. And the Beech just doesn't. And I think it just makes the flight model, I don't know, feel a little bit one-dimensional. Maybe is the way I want to put it. It's not unenjoyable, but it isn't kind of the unique experience that I kind of would look forward to in an aircraft, especially one like this that is being, it's being sold as a local legend, as a kind of an icon of a period of flight. I don't really think the flight model is living up to that expectation at this point in time. But that being said, landing the Beech does require you to pay a little bit of attention. It's not as straightforward as landing a 172. Got to get the flare right. And it is a tail dragger, and as you can see, I didn't quite get it down without an extra little bounce. And then the rollout can be a little bit of a challenge if you get sloppy on the rudder, as I did on this particular one, but we did manage to keep it on upright for most of the rollout. So, as we approach the taxiway at slightly higher speed than I'm really comfortable with, but I'm going to try it anyways, maybe it's time to just wrap up with some final thoughts about the Beech 18. I like a lot of things about the model. It's a great looking model, both inside and out. The steam gauge cockpit works well, has a lot of character, and the combination of good visibility, high cruising speed, and a simple but functional autopilot are going to make it a really good choice for sightseeing trips. I did find the model a bit disappointing, though, in that there are still a few bugs that need to be worked out, including controls that are difficult to use, and some odd behaviors, like the overly loud boost pump and the stall horn that sounds when the wheels are on the ground. I did find that the flight model lacked a lot of character. It was a bit lifeless, which was a disappointment in an aircraft of this era. And then lastly, the sound model is, I would say, particularly weak in the Beech 18. And especially for a model that's built around those iconic engines, that is unfortunate. Overall, though, I am glad that I picked the Beech 18 up. At under $20 US, it was a great deal. But it also feels like an airplane that sells for $20. Which is too bad, because it's an airplane that deserves a more thorough treatment, I think. And hopefully it'll get one someday. Alright, that's all for now. This is going to be Sidekick, signing off.